So we are going to start the last session of today. So the last session of today is going to be about silent pandemic, the fight against antimicrobial resistance. So we are going to learn about another alternative we have right now for fighting against antimicrobial resistance, some innovative therapies. And for discussing about that, we have two speakers. First speaker is going to be, both of the speakers you know about them because they have been participating in the meeting during today. So the first one is Alex Soriano, which is the head of infectious disease in Clinic Hospital. And he's going to talk about the challenge of antimicrobial resistance. So he's going to put the focus in the problem we are facing right now. And the second speaker is going to be Laura Lechuga, that you know that she's the head of the Nanobiosensors and Bioanalytical Application Group in the Catalan Institute of Neuroscience. And Laura is going to talk about this innovation, which is the advanced nanotechnological tools for combating antimicrobial resistance. So I invite first Alex, and then Laura to cover this topic. This is the last session of today. Thank you for still being here. It's a long day, but I think it deserves that you stay here for this last session.
Thank you, Ricard. They asked me to select for some threats on antimicrobial resistance, and of course, for sure, there are thousands, and probably you would choose a different one, yeah. But I have select four, yeah. We know well that this is data, the most recent data that we have from ECDC. Where about 7 to 8% of the patients in the ICU develop a nosocomial infection. And one of the interesting points, my perspective, is that when you check which is the most common pathogen in causing pneumonia in the ICU, the big one is Klebsiella nowadays. Not more Pseudomonas, but Klebsiella. And it has an important interest because Klebsiella, unfortunately, is a quite pathogenic bag, but also is able to share quite a lot of mobile genetic elements like plasmids carrying many different beta-lactamases. And this is, of course, nowadays a big issue, as we will discuss also a little bit. No? For example, this is data just around Europe. Klebsiella nowadays in the ICU, in the nosocomial infections, 38% of them are ESBL producers, yeah, or third-generation cephalosporin resistance, that the majority of them are in the end ESBL. And the rate of carbapenem resistance, particularly in Klebsiella, is around, as you can see here, 17% in Klebsiella and almost 25–26% in Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So it's big numbers. I think that these are, of course, one of the most important ones. And this fact of Klebsiella is something that indeed, when you check the most recent clinical trials performed in nosocomial pneumonia, the ones with ceftazidime-avibactam, with ceftolozane, with imipenem-relebactam, or with cafiderocol, when you check which is the most common pathogen, is indeed Klebsiella pneumonia. The second one is Pseudomonas aeruginosa, the third one Enterobacterales, and Acinetobacter baumannii, as you know, it depends a little bit on the region, so the prevalence is a little bit different in different places. But Klebsiella pneumonia is the most common pathogen, apparently increasing with all the problems associated with this pathogen. But let me show you a little bit some history that it's making the problem even higher. We know the Merino trial, probably you know that. It was a trial that it has been some discussions behind, but compares carbapenems versus pip/tazo for the management of ESBL infections. And as you know, the final conclusion, published in JAMA, concluded that those patients that received piperacillin-tazobactam, and these were not so severe infections, indeed the majority of them were urinary tract infections, had a significantly higher mortality rate, 12% versus 3.7% among those receiving carbapenems, receiving meropenem. Accordingly, although there is some post-hoc analysis that reduced this difference because of the analysis of resistance was not maybe so detailed in the primary analysis, but even though the mortality was even after this correction higher in those receiving pip/tazo. Accordingly, What has happened in many institutions, at least it's my experience, what it's happening in my institution, the increase in the number of ESBLs, it has been associated with an increase in the carbapenem consumption. And the carbapenem consumption, in the end, it has been associated with increase in carbapenem-resistant Enterobacterales, at least in many places. And probably, and this is a matter of discussion, maybe we can discuss afterwards if we have time, but apparently, and there is some recent data supporting that, carbapenems are probably the more aggressive antibiotics against our microbiota. Definitely are probably the most potent ones in terms of bactericidal activity. We have a lot of data about that, but also at the same time, we have clear data. This is just a paper published from China, where they analyze a large database and they conclude that the most important drug and significantly associated with the selection of resistance after using it is indeed carbapenems, even if we analyze E. coli, Klebsiella, or Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So accordingly, the first challenge, the first concern, threaten, whatever you wanted to say, is how to increase the awareness of hand hygiene to reduce the horizontal transmission in hospital settings, because in the end, this is individually probably the most potent strategy to reduce this problem in the hospitals. But secondly, how to reduce the carbapenem consumption. And this is, of course, it was difficult in the past because we don't have alternatives, but this, nowadays it's completely different. We have several alternatives. The problem is that this concept of dysbiosis, of a microbiota disruption, of course, is something that apparently is not so important as, of course, many other aspects, but probably we need to address, because the carbapenem-resistant in Klebsiella pneumonia in Europe is something that is increasing. There are several countries in green, of course, but some of them we are still in yellow, others in orange, and even some countries even in red. So the prevalence of this very aggressive pathogen, because it's clear, I mean, it's gaining even Pseudomonas in nosocomial infections, so it's really pathogenic one, but also it is associated with a high burden resistant problem. Yeah, look at this is data from my hospital. Yeah, this is all the multi-drug resistant pathogens isolated last year in my institution, and what we observe is the following. When we analyze how much of these 386 samples that were isolated in my institution last year, as you can see here, 38% were clinical samples. Yeah? And the majority in my institution here, Barcelona, is a place where we are predominantly OXA48 population. Yeah? And this was indeed the main beta-lactamase, but as you can see here, the second most common one nowadays is already BIM, a metallo-beta-lactamase, and the third one is an NDM. So this is problematic because the alternatives, the therapeutic alternatives for these pathogens, as you know, are even more limited. But interestingly, when we look at the majority of the strains, of the multi-drug resistant strains were isolated in the gut, I mean from rectal swabs, and in pathogens that are not so aggressive in the end, I mean Titrobacter, Enterobacter, pathogens that don't have the aggressiveness or the invasiveness as Klebsiella or Pseudomonas or even E. coli. And as you can see here, of course, the beta-lactamases, the distribution was similar. But of course, remember that the ability of pathogens in the gut to interchange the genetic mobile elements like plasmids containing the beta-lactamases is something that's easy. And so again, the selection pressure performed by the consumption of carbapenems, of course, is playing an important role to favor the increase in the gut of these pathogens carrying, or these bacteria carrying the multi-drug resistant elements, but in the end can transfer this material to the more pathogenic ones like Klebsiella, and then we will have problems. Just some data. This is an outbreak recently described in France by NDM5, that remember this is a metallo-beta-lactamase that unfortunately is even resistant to cafidrocol, so it's a real problematic pathogen because it takes us to coming back to the colistin, for example, or aminoglycosides with all the problems that it represents in the end, or for example, these descriptions also of a new OXA 181 or KPC or plus KPC 121 that are in the end included in this Klebsiella, that it was resistant to all the new drugs. Why is this happening? Well, because what happens is that a beta-lactamase is something that is useless for the bacteria. For the bacteria, it has not so big cost. I mean, the beta-lactamase is something that is not necessary for the bacteria. If a bacteria loses a porin or has to increase the expression of efflux pumps, it takes quite a lot of energy. Yeah? But the mutation or the change or the acquisition of a beta-lactamase, this is something that for bacteria is so easy. For this reason, if you look at the microbiologists and data, you will find thousands of different beta-lactamases. And accordingly, this problem probably it will spread quite so fast as we are facing nowadays. Of course, we have a lot of new drugs. Yeah, we have a lot of particularly new beta-lactamase inhibitors: abibactam, relebactam, barbarbactam, cidibactam, taniborbactam, metazobactam. So quite a lot of news, but all together, all of them are associated with a specific drug. Yeah, and of course, we need more. Yes, definitely, we need more. We have also cefidrochol, that is a new cephalosporin, but definitely one of the major challenges nowadays is how to reduce the time needed to approve a new drug. This takes a while. In many occasions, we are waiting for cefidrochol. We were waiting 3 years. Come on, we needed the drugs as soon as possible. But also, why not to have the beta-lactamase inhibitors individually? Why I have to have the abibactam plus ceftazidime? We know that the combination of this drug with aztreonam nowadays is quite useful for managing, for example, all the metallobeta-lactamases, some of the metallobeta-lactamases that we have in Enterobacterales. Yeah? But why not to have individually and to combine with the best beta-lactam at a specific moment is something that is a challenge for the future. And of course, we need more investing in this area for sure. Just something that it's repetitive is something that I cannot understand why still there is publishing data on this topic. No? It's necessary to use an empirical drug, active empirical drug for a patient that has sepsis? Of course, yes, but still it produces papers published in JAMA. Yeah? I don't know why, because it's so evident. This is just a large study that confirms that within the first 24 hours, if you administer an active antibiotic, your patient decreases the mortality by approximately 50%, even if it's a gram-negative, gram-positive, or a candida. Which are the pathogens that are more associated with a non-active empirical antibiotic therapy? It's obvious, of course, those with resistance, Acinetobacter, third-generation cephalosporin resistance in Enterobacterales, carbapenemase-producing bacteria, and of course, vancomycin-resistant Enterococci or Candida species. Yeah? So, of course, and this is just a problem in my institution, the increase in multi-drug-resistant Pseudomonas among neutropenic patients, I mean, so severe patients, leads to a high rate, of patients receiving an inappropriate empirical antimicrobial therapy when they had bacteremia by Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So the third problem is how to provide an active empirical antimicrobial therapy to all patients with a severe infection. This is a major threat. How to solve this issue is not an unsolved issue, then it's, of course, it has a great impact in the outcome of our patients. And finally, just the last one, challenge that we have in the future, I think, is how to address the rapid diagnostic test. We are talking about rapid diagnostic tests for a while, yeah, but it's still not yet the critical one that gives us information in a rapid way. What means rapid? I always say that rapid means less than 2 hours. Yeah? There are many tests in 6 hours, but this is not, matching with the daily practice, yeah, because unfortunately we don't have 24/7 per week, a microbiologist in the lab. Yeah? So this is just the data. Of course, new tests are able to reduce significantly from the standard 72 hours to 3.5 hours for this multiplex. This was useful in terms of reducing the consumption of specific antibiotics, particularly carbapenems, so very important. But of course, what we need for the future is to have this rapid test available 24/7, and of course, as much possible in everywhere where we're dealing with these patients. Thank you.
talk of